The camera pans across a forgotten dirt road in the heart of rural West Virginia. A chilling silence lingers in the air. Suddenly, a voice breaks through. Some families carry secrets, but none as disturbing as this. In the town of Odd, a name almost too fitting, lies America's most infamous inbred family, the Whittakers. Their story isn't folklore, nor urban legend. It's a raw and unsettling reality, documented on camera. When filmmaker Mark Lyda first encountered them, he described the experience as terrifying. The Whittakers' existence was marked by extreme poverty, guttural communication, and physical deformities that told the silent story of generations of incest. The images he captured were so haunting, they seemed to belong to a horror film rather than real life. Yet, behind those eyes and fractured words, there was pain, resilience, and something society was never prepared to confront. But how did this family come to live this way? What chain of choices, traditions, and neglect could create such a chilling legacy hidden deep in the Appalachian hills? And why did so many people in the surrounding communities turn a blind eye? The answers are darker than anyone expected. The Whittaker family lived in a tiny hamlet called Odd, tucked away in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. This wasn't a place travelers stumbled upon. It was forgotten, isolated, and cut off from the bustling world beyond. Houses here leaned with age, rusted cars lined front yards, and silence stretched across dirt roads, broken only by the barking of stray dogs. To outsiders, Odd appeared bleak but ordinary, a place where poverty was inherited as much as land. Yet behind the sagging doors of one weather-beaten shack, a family lived under conditions that stunned even those used to hardship. The Whittakers were generations deep into their bloodline, the result of relatives marrying relatives in a cycle so entrenched that it became their normal. Neighbors whispered but rarely intervened. To some, the Whittakers were simply different. To others, they were a living cautionary tale. And yet, their existence wasn't entirely hidden. Locals knew of them, spoke in hushed tones, and warned strangers not to venture too close to their home. Still, no one could have predicted how shocking the reality inside that shack truly was, until the world saw it through the lens of a camera. At first glance, the Whittakers' daily life resembled any struggling rural family. They rose with the sun, tended to what little chores they could manage, and gathered on the porch when the air cooled in the evenings. The family's dogs barked wildly at strangers, serving as both guardians and a warning sign to keep outsiders at bay. To those who only caught glimpses from afar, it looked like simple, backwoods living. But upon closer inspection, unsettling cracks appeared in this facade of normalcy. Communication within the family was fractured. Some members spoke in broken sentences, while others could only grunt or bark, echoing the very dogs that surrounded their home. Their clothing was worn thin, their shoes mismatched, and yet they carried on as if nothing about their lives was unusual. Children from nearby towns, when passing through, would sometimes catch sight of the Whittakers and run home with wild stories. Adults brushed it off as exaggeration, kids inventing tales to spook one another. But the truth was stranger, darker, and far more tragic than anyone outside the shack dared believe. Something about the Whittaker family didn't just feel poor. It felt wrong. Deeply, disturbingly wrong. The whispers of unease grew louder the closer people got to the Whittakers. Neighbors recalled how, when approached, family members would react with guttural sounds, strange stares, and unsettling body language that made visitors retreat almost immediately. Some described encounters where the family's dogs lunged violently, forcing people back down the dirt path before they could even knock on the door. It was as though the entire property was designed to keep the world out. Over time, the family's behavior became impossible to ignore. The odd way they communicated, the twisted features of their faces, the vacant eyes, it all spoke of something more than poverty. Locals began to speculate openly about inbreeding, a word that carried both judgment and pity. Still, little was done. Authorities looked the other way. Social services rarely ventured up the mountain road. The Whittakers remained hidden in plain sight. But not everyone could dismiss what they saw. A few brave souls who managed to enter their home spoke of a suffocating atmosphere, cluttered rooms, collapsing walls, and an almost primal way of living that felt closer to survival than family life. And then, someone decided to document it all. It was during one visit by filmmaker Mark Lyta that the Whittaker family's reality became impossible to dismiss as mere rumor. Under the dim glow of a porch light, the camera captured what words could barely explain. Haunting faces, twisted features, and sounds that echoed more like cries from the past than human speech. The dogs barked relentlessly, circling, as if warning him to leave. But he stayed, recording what few outsiders had ever dared to see. What unfolded that night felt like stepping into another world, one cut off from time, from society, from everything familiar. The Whittakers sat silently, or muttered in incomprehensible tones, their eyes hollow yet piercing. Lyta later admitted he felt genuine fear, not of violence, but of the unsettling aura that surrounded the family. Every movement, every sound, felt drenched in decades of suffering and secrecy. Then, a moment caught on film silenced him completely. One family member let out a guttural cry, a sound so raw it seemed to tear through the quiet night. It wasn't words, but it was communication, pain, expressed in the only way they knew how. The camera kept rolling, and the world would never forget what it saw. When the footage of the Whittakers surfaced online, the world reacted with a mixture of horror, disbelief, and pity. Viewers couldn't decide whether they were watching a documentary, a nightmare, or something in between. The images spread quickly, sparking heated debates about exploitation, morality, and the forgotten corners of America. But in odd West Virginia, the reaction was different. Some locals were furious that their hidden secret had been exposed, while others admitted relief that the truth had finally been dragged into the light. Authorities, who had long ignored the family's conditions, suddenly faced questions they couldn't easily answer. How could a family live in such isolation and desperation for so long without intervention? Investigations confirmed what many had whispered for decades. Generations of inbreeding had shaped the family's tragic reality. Doctors and geneticists weighed in, explaining how such cycles led to severe mental and physical disorders. Yet, these clinical words failed to capture the human suffering that lay at the heart of it all. For the first time, the Whittakers were no longer just a rumor whispered in the hills. They were a living symbol of society's neglect and the dark secrets that thrive when no one dares to look closer. Even after the world saw their faces, questions lingered like smoke in the air. Who was responsible for allowing this family to spiral into such darkness? Was it the fault of generations who ignored the obvious, or was it society's abandonment that sealed their fate? The Whittakers continued to live in that same shack, hidden deep in the Appalachians, their lives unchanged by the sudden glare of the world's attention. Filmmaker Mark Lyta admitted that even after multiple visits, He left with more unease than answers. Each trip revealed another layer of pain, a glimpse of lives lived on the edge of survival, where communication was fractured and the very concept of normal had long since eroded. And yet, the most disturbing truth remains this: the Whittakers are not entirely alone. In remote pockets across the world, other families live similarly hidden lives, their stories untold, their struggles unseen. How many more exist in silence, waiting to be discovered? As the camera fades to black, one question echoes louder than the rest. What horrors still lie hidden in the forgotten corners of America, and who will dare to uncover them?